This has got to be one of the most infuriating products I've ever reviewed, and represents a really annoying shift in the smart home industry that I'm starting to see more and more of recently, which is essentially products that have a really great promise from a hardware and feature point of view, but are hugely let down by the software experience when it actually ships. And it's an issue that exists in so many industries now, and I'm sure you've even experienced this at some point, where basically a product gets announced and there is a lot of hype generated around it, and then it gets delivered and the company's like, yeah, you know all of those really cool features that we mentioned? Well, those are going to be coming in a software update later. And what you're left with is like literally a bare minimum product that represents nothing like what you ordered, and you basically are paying to be a beta tester for that company. That's essentially what the brand new SwitchBot Universal Remote is, and that's a real shame coming from a big, well-established company like SwitchBot. Holding the Universal Remote in the hand for the first time, my first impressions were just as good as when I saw the initial announcement. The top third of the unit is taken up by a 2.4-inch LCD display, which has a surprisingly decent resolution. Not sure on the exact figures, but certainly to my eye it looks very good for a remote. It mostly displays things in black and white, but will occasionally give a little bit of colour in some menus. Then, right under the screen is 4 programmable buttons, which I love, and then the rest of the remote is taken up by a minimalist set of buttons for the devices you are trying to control, and as you can see, it's mostly set up for TV or media devices, however you can configure these in software. The layout of the buttons I find is actually really good, with everything in reach with one hand and easily visible. Most of these smart universal remotes have UIs that just aren't that nice to use and feel really clunky, but the SwitchBot remote actually has a really nice intuitive UI in terms of just accessing and controlling multiple devices. If you press the red SwitchBot button in the middle, it will take you to a device page where you can then use the navigation buttons to select a device. And then once you open a specific device, then the main buttons on the remote become active for that device selected. So for example, if I have my Office TV selected, then the on-off buttons, volume buttons, home buttons, and so on are now active just for that TV. If I then go back and select my living room TV, then those buttons are now active for that device. You can also remap any of the main buttons so that, for example, if you want to change the home button to a settings button, you can then remap them in the SwitchBot app. Battery life is quoted at 150 days of use based on an average of 5 minutes of use per day and can be recharged with the USB-C port on the bottom. There is some other features I like too, such as Raise to Wake to wake up the display and start using it, and the Find My Remote feature, which will beep the device in the app to make sure it's easier to find. One of the best things about the SwitchBot remote, however, is its price, which is going to be retailing for just £60, which I do think is very reasonable for the hardware that we've seen so far. That's all pretty positive so far, but hang on, we are about to take a sharp nosedive. The first thing that actually really annoyed me was when I tried to add a new device to the remote. I naively went into the SwitchBot app, selected the remote, as you would think, hit Manage Devices, and then you'd think that hitting the plus button would let you add a new device like a TV, right? Seemed pretty reasonable to me, and this gives you two options. Either import devices from the SwitchBot hub, which supports IR also, or third-party control, which is one that I assumed it would be in, only to be presented with an option for a Fire Stick or an Apple TV. No option in here at all for IR devices. After fumbling around looking for the option, I eventually discovered that the only way to add IR devices to the remote is by first adding them to a SwitchBot hub and then importing those devices from the hub to the remote, because for some reason that makes complete sense. Now, this wouldn't be so bad if it was just a bad UI decision. However, the fact that there is no way to add a new IR device directly from the remote makes absolutely no sense. Because to add a new device, like a TV for example, it means that you need to have the hub in the same room as the device you want to learn. And if the hub is already in the same room as the device I want to control with the remote, then why do I need the remote? For example, my SwitchBot hub is behind me here in the office, but let's say if I wanted to add my living room TV to the remote, do they expect me to unplug that hub to take it down to the living room and then have all the Matter devices that I have connected to the SwitchBot hub just break, just so I can learn that one device and then take it back up here? I genuinely can't understand the rationale for this here when the remote obviously has infrared built into it. Someone help me make this make sense. The ironic thing is that on the product page for the Universal Remote, they literally have a section that says register your remote control any way you'd like, and then they proceed to tell you that you need to learn devices through a SwitchBot hub and not the remote. Matter is also a big feature that is talked about a lot for this remote, as that makes it compatible with other platforms outside of the SwitchBot ecosystem, in theory. In practice, the Matter side of this remote has been completely unusable for the most part for me. Firstly, I added it through the SwitchBot Hub 2 as a Matter device, like I do with every other SwitchBot device that supports Matter, and it showed up with 4 buttons inside of Home Assistant, which was great. However, I couldn't ever get any of these buttons to trigger, they just said unavailable the entire time, as anytime you press them, it tells you that they aren't assigned to anything inside of the SwitchBot app, and I couldn't find any way to do that with inside of the SwitchBot app. As it turns out, this isn't mentioned on the product page, but it currently only works on iOS and not Android. You cannot configure the Matter side on Android, and to make matters worse, it only works with the HomeKit app on iOS too, where you do get the option to set up buttons only inside of the HomeKit app. Aside from it only working on HomeKit, I ran into countless bugs with this actually trying to get it to work, where the buttons wouldn't actually show up inside of the HomeKit app. And then when they finally did show up, I proceeded to assign functions to the Matter buttons, but only 1 button out of 4 would actually work, with the rest saying that they were still unassigned to a function when they clearly weren't inside of the HomeKit app. So I only still have 1 button working to this day after weeks of getting it to work, or trying to get it to work. There's also a bug where I wasn't able to rename the buttons from button 1, 2, 3 or 4 to literally anything else. It just had to stay as button 1, 2, 3, 4. And neither would the name of the device rename either, it just comes up with an error anytime you try and save it. Once you do get a button assigned properly inside of HomeKit, it will actually trigger inside of Home Assistant. So you can, in theory, assign an automation to it, assuming you meet the conditions of only using iOS and HomeKit. Otherwise, better luck next time, I guess. The irony of Matter supposed to be the standard that makes everything work with each other, and here we are almost 2 years later where this Matter remote is locked down to a single phone OS with a single smart home platform. To be clear, I don't know if the issue is on the Matter side or the SwitchBot side, but that doesn't matter. In no way should this be called Matter compatible under those circumstances. It should just be called HomeKit compatible in its current state. I also got sync errors several times where no matter what I did, the remote refused to sync with the hub. So for example, if I changed a function of a button or remapped a button, it would often come up with sync errors. And the only solution was to completely remove the remote from the SwitchBot app and re-add it, losing all of the customizations that I had applied to the remote. You can also add SwitchBot only devices to the remote, again assuming you have the SwitchBot hub. I was able to add the robot vacuum that I have to the remote, for example, but you only get the option to turn it on or return it to base. It would be pretty cool if it would also give you a list of rooms that you have set up on the robot map, and then you could target those rooms from the remote directly. It also doesn't work with all of the SwitchBot devices. For example, the SwitchBot lock does not show up as an option inside of the remote. I really do wish this supported more than just infrared devices too. It would be really nice if it also supported RF devices to make it compete much better with Broadlink devices, for example. Maybe that will come later in the form of a Universal Remote Pro or something like that. There's also other devices hidden behind future updates like Google TV, Roku and Nvidia Shield devices that are just not available yet. So the only media devices that are directly supported is Fire Stick or Apple TV. The level of unfinished this remote is at is bizarre to me from a company like SwitchBot. I've roasted other companies before about shipping products that are clearly unfinished, but those are all startups mostly with a single product, which granted does not excuse the behavior, but I really do not expect to see an established company like SwitchBot engaging in this behavior. And what's worse is that they clearly are aware of how bad the software is on the universal remote, because I asked them flat out directly why I was intentionally left out of being sent a review unit unlike everyone else, since I typically get them very early, and they said it's because updates were coming later and they didn't want me to review it as it was then, and they were going to send it to me later down the line. Now, yes, bugs happen in software, of course they do, but I cannot stand more and more manufacturers starting to ship hardware with so many of the major features either downright broken or under the asterisk of coming later. It's an absolute joke. Software updates should be used to fix small issues that arise or to add new features that weren't part of the original marketing and customers aren't buying the device specifically for. I should never need to wait to buy a product and have to wait a month, 6 months, a year for the main feature that I'm buying it for to be added. It's not acceptable, and it's something that's creeping more and more into smart home products, as if they didn't get a bad enough rep as it is with intercompatibility and security issues. I just can't understand the reason for them launching it in this state. This isn't a brand new category of device, so they really didn't need to rush this out and be first to market. And they also fail to remember that these reviews are permanent on the internet. So in a year's time, when someone searches for reviews of this thing, mine and other reviewers' videos are going to pop up and leave a very bad impression. And reviewers don't typically come back to review a device later down the road after it's been updated. And why should they when it should have launched complete in the first place? And I know this behavior is rife in all of the industries just now, the gaming industry probably being the worst offender, but I hate it so much, and I don't want this thing to start becoming the norm in the smart home space too. It has to stop. Anyways, that's about it for this video. Sorry for ranting the entire time, but it's something that I do feel very strongly about, and I want to see this change and this disappear. Especially from SwitchBot, who has released a lot of neat devices over the years and they just kind of do their own thing. But I can only review what's here now today, and what's here now is completely not finished. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. As always, maybe you've already picked one up. If you have, I'd love to hear what you think about it, and I would love to hear what your experience of it has been so far. Maybe your experience has been different to mine, so do leave that down in the comments. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. Drop this video a like and get subscribed, and I will see you in the next video.